I'm there to celebrate the 50 years of Saturday Night Live. So we all make our way onto the stage. I find myself being jostled, and I'm right behind De Niro, and I bump into him, and he turns around, and he has that, that particular expression, which it's just like, how can you support that schmuck? And I just said, I love you.
In this episode, I sit down with comedian and actor Rob Schneider, author of You Can Do It. Speak Your Mind, America.
We are appealing to people's fears and their desires more than their logic of what's best for them. Sony lot, the Fox lot, Warner Brothers lot, those places in 5 years will just be real estate. And I think it's their own decline.
He explains why free speech is vital to a divided society.
We're not China. In China, they give you one party. They tell you who to vote for. That's it. We're America. We got freedom. We get 2 parties. Can we at least vote for the other party?
Behind his humor and sharp observations, Rob reminds us of what truly matters.
Sometimes in our worst moments, we must remember there's a human being inside there. Every human being is deserving of being treated with dignity.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Rob Schneider, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. During COVID was a really dark time for me and for a lot of people. And one of my escape valves, it was 2 pillars that I clung to at that time, Joe Rogan and the Epoch Times. So every morning I wanted, what's Joe Rogan saying? And what can I read at the Epoch Times? That was my escape valve from tyranny. And thank you for that, because the Epoch Times is important, and it is journalism, and it is a potentiality for what all journalists should strive for. Be it, tell the truth as best as you can. No one can be 100% purely objective, but just tell the news and let us decide for ourselves. Don't tell us what to think. And you guys do that, so thank you.
Rob, you made a huge impression on me the other night. And apparently you had talked about this earlier, and it was covered in the Daily Mail. You gave this anecdote, and the anecdote was your experience at a Saturday Night Live reunion bumping into Robert De Niro. And I want to get you to reprise that here, because and then I'll explain why.
He's obviously like the heir apparent to Marlon Brando. He's an incredible, an actor of great power and esteem and all this. However, I think that, like a lot of people, I think there's whatever's going on in their life, you could decide to focus all of that, if you want to use the term negativity, anger, or what have you, in a particular avenue. And I think, for some people, I think it has a name, and that's President Donald J. Trump. So knowing that and seeing that, like a lot of people have, but also knowing that he's a good man. I mean, I know him outside of that, and he was very helpful with the movie called Vaxxed to put it into Tribeca Film Festival. And that wasn't an easy thing to do. And the pressure that he received from that, which I don't think he was used to. He's just used to being, this is a 2-time Academy Award winner. Everywhere he goes, I'm sure he gets a table at a restaurant pretty easily. So, but he got so much flack for that he ended up pulling the film out of the film festival, which, we who were involved with the movie Vax totally understood. And the attention that brought to us was a great advertisement for the film. I mean, at the end of the day, as the old adage is, there's no such thing as bad publicity. When I saw him there, I instantly want to not have conflict. I don't want to have, he was 2 rows in front of me, and I went like, well, that's a person. I don't want to ruin his evening, because I'm sure he knows I'm a Trump supporter, and I don't want him to ruin mine. And so we'll just avoid it. I'm there to celebrate the 50 years of Saturday Night Live. I'm part of their history. They're part of mine. And so they were kind enough to include me into these festivities, and we're all there in our tuxedos. But then towards the end of the night, we get into a cramped area where we have to all walk on stage. It's very nice. They invite everybody for one final bow as it were. And who anyone who's ever been a cast member, anyone who's ever hosted the show. Unfortunately, the show's been on, well, fortunately, it's been on for 50 years, but unfortunately, everybody in the audience was actually a cast member or hosted the show. So we all make our way onto the stage. And I find myself being jostled, and I'm right behind De Niro, and I finally, I'm trying to stay away, and I bump into him, and he turns around, and he has that, that particular expression, which is, I think everybody knows. It's just like, how can you support that schmuck? He gave me that look like, what? And he was about to really go at me. And, and I just literally, there's an interesting thing. You can just choose to not have conflict. And I just said, I love you. Anyway. And that's what he gave me that look like. And I was like, no, I really love you. And I touched him and I said, no, I love you, man. And he goes, okay. And I think it diffused that situation. I'm not always going to be at my best, but at that moment I was. And that was what needed to happen. The cancel culture, we're not going to win. And when I say we, I mean we as a society, we're not going to get anywhere by just the battle. We're going to have to find some common ground, and we're going to have to, have people who are willing to take responsibility for their own actions and how they're willing to treat other people. And I at that moment I was in a good place. I'm not always going to be in that good place, but it was what was needed at that time. And I hope I can channel that more often.
Well, it was beautiful. You gave that anecdote at a fundraiser in Irvine that you were helping us out with. I thought comports very well with our ethos at Epoch Times, like how we approach basically doing journalism. Like we're always trying to reach people basically with ideas that in many cases they may not be ready for, and that's very difficult in this day and age,
especially the way the press is viewed now. I mean, look at today's news. You wake up to the New York Times piece about, Donald Trump having the royal Saudi prince, who's, according to an intelligence report, said that he was responsible for the murder of a journalist, Khashoggi, and was also working for Qatar, being paid by Qatar, which is it complicates it. But nevertheless, that's a real something that a question that should be asked. However, my question is, why wasn't that asked, or why aren't these same questions asked under the previous administration? And where is the objectivity for the press? You have to be able to ask difficult questions of every administration. And so you have this extreme form of tribalism now, whereas the tribe is illogical because it has no empathy and we saw it in the brutal murder of Charlie Kirk, where the assassin was somehow so wrapped up into this tribalism for his particular side that he just had no empathy. He cared more about the gun that was missing, that he was going to upset his grandfather by not being able to recover the gun. Then he cared about the murder of this this incredible young man, and a young father and a young husband. And so there's a complete lack of empathy on one side for anybody outside your particular tribe. And then there's an insane amount, too much, I would say, pathological empathy for people in your tribe. I mean, the idea that, like, it's for somebody who is a criminal and someone who's, you would have, like, for someone who's in the country illegally, has been trafficked people, like this Garcia guy, and the idea that he is this father and he's been stolen. It's like, we need to look at things as best as we can. We need to have a press that is going to attempt, and it's impossible to be completely objective, but they must try.
Truth-seeking, right? Genuine truth-seeking with the knowledge that you can't necessarily get all of it every time. And in fact, in some cases, very hard to get it. But the question is, are you trying?
My friend had dinner with the editor-in-chief of the New York Times a few years back. And he said, is objectivity something that you're concerned about? And his answer was, I believe it is my moral imperative to make sure that Donald Trump does not become president of the United States again. So what does that mean? And then it just kind of goes to show the difference. And you could see it in the headlines, the same situation of the former administration, the Biden administration, and the same situation. And the headlines are much more jarringly tribal in favor of the previous administration. So that's I think that's very telling of where we're at now, to where, I mean, it's almost, I would say not almost, but it is approaching what the former Soviet Union had. And that's why, like, my friend, like Ilya Baskin, who was from the Soviet Union and knew what it was like, said, I don't know why your country, why you guys would go and want that, but you are approaching it, and that you can't see it is communism, that is what's happening, that you can't see that is an incredible, horrible thing that you are approaching. And so what happened was that he would tell you that, Noam Chomsky would tell you that the Soviet Union, people knew that Pravda and TASS, the government mouthpieces, no one believed it. They knew it was just, garbage, that what the government wanted. And so where did they go for truth? Where did they find out what's really happening in their society? And it was person to person. What did you hear? What do you know? And that's exactly what happened. And I think exponentially it happened during COVID, when you knew you couldn't believe the New York Times and the Washington Post anymore. And who did you know? You had to go. So you went to, like, who's saying what? And that's where podcasts exploded. Because, well, Joe Rogan's saying something, and I believe that more than I believe the New York Times. And when the CNN colored his face to make him look really sick, I mean, how come nobody got fired over that? When Gupta went on Joe Rogan, he would not admit and wouldn't give in and to the fact that this actually happened. He just seemed slightly disappointed, which is not what needs to happen. If we're going to have this system of just two political parties, we need two normal, sane political parties. But for the Democratic Party to not come out and admit that the Biden administration, in fact, did day one with Facebook, with Google, with Instagram, with the tech companies, censor Americans day one, and within the first 24 hours of the Biden administration, that they don't come out and say that that is egregious and that is government censorship and that is wrong. For not one Democratic senator or congressman to come out and admit that that's wrong is a stunning indictment of where we're at. Whereas the tribal party system seems to be the only thing that's important, and maintaining that and returning that to power is more important than any objectivity or truth or what's best for society. And I think that's a dangerous place that's is setting up something approaching authoritarian dictatorship or some version of Chinese-style social credit system. It's definitely an encroachment on that. And I think that Donald Trump, for better or worse, in all his picadillos, was a resounding rejection of wanting a continuation of a system that was just lying about everything.
And we're back with actor, comedian, and author of You Can Do It, Rob Schneider. It's interesting that you say there was this, people understood that Pravda was not the truth. And I've always assumed that. And of course, but I also realized the thing that, to me, the biggest lesson of COVID in a way was kind of the opposite, was that actually a lot of people do believe it.
Yes.
Because I think in many ways, I was sort of a bit immune to that. Not everything. But I'm always just have this natural skeptical sort of disposition,
well, you're right? Well, the people do. Yeah. That's the difference. And Noam Chomsky talks about that, is that's how much more insidious propaganda is in a so-called, in a free society, because people do believe the New York Times. They're more likely to believe the Chicago Tribune, New York Times, Washington Post, and they'll take that as truth. Whereas I think COVID helped melt that, or at least got a lot of people to question it. And that was the breakdown in people who, the 80 million Americans who said, we're not taking that shot. That was for the pressure that people were under. Firing, frontline workers and nurses and doctors who refused to administer or refused to take that shot. These are people who risked their lives during COVID. For them to be fired was a stunning indictment on the Biden administration. And thankfully, those workers, a lot of them have been rehired, have been compensated. And, if you don't have a choice, that's how I got into this attack was pretty basic. The last refuge of your own freedom is your own body, your body autonomy. If the government can make you take any and inject something, an experimental gene therapy or anything into your body against your will, then the government is now able to do any form of atrocity. Once they break that barrier, there's nothing they can't do. And if that's not a wake-up call, if people don't come to their senses and take personal responsibility, and that's what needs to happen. We must take personal responsibility for our own bodies, for our own freedom, we must be courageous about that, or we're not going to continue. And that's what, when I went to Berkeley, which there was a riot last week, and I was supposed to go with Charlie Kirk, and I asked him over the summer, I said, let's do another university. It was so fun, and it was fun because you had people challenging us. To be a vibrant society, we must be able to be challenged. We got to challenge ourselves. And as the great Andrew Doyle says, we must challenge our certainties. We must, because we can't have a firm foundational belief system that's unchallenged. Then it'll be static. To continue to be creative, to continue to innovate, to continue to be a vibrant culture, we must allow these challenges. So when I said, Charlie, let's go, I'm going to go to the craziest place. And he said, well, let's go to Berkeley. And so we went. He was murdered in front of his children. And I'm not quite sure how to filter that. There seems to be such a dis-ease in our culture and a lack of the most basic human dignity, compassion for this man. And what happened after. It exposed so much ugliness in our culture that I don't think it's always been there. I think we're at a point where somehow that is accepted by a large group of the populace. So I went alone after his murder, and I went with his mentor, Frank Turek, and there was a group of people at Berkeley who rioted outside and set off tear gas and devices that sounded like gunfire, threw things, spit at people, and the police and the University of Cal Berkeley, to their great shame, did not prevent those people from interfering. And I include the Berkeley police in that. They did not allow a corridor to get everybody in there. And that's very shameful, because that is 1964. That was the free speech movement in universities. And it wasn't for just one side. It was all sides. So for them to fall so deeply off that precipice against, and to fall into a abyss of censorship is shameful and unfortunate. But it exposes where we're at least. And I think I'd rather have it out in the open. That's why free speech is so important, and the idea of censoring. The Democrats, during the election, Tim Walz said, free speech doesn't include hate speech. Okay, well then who gets to decide what hate speech is? And then the government's always going to decide hate speech or to limit speech that helps and supports what the government is trying to accomplish, which is to squelch dissent of people who are not going along with their policies, Democrat or Republican. It's the same. So it was disappointing, but at the same time, I was buoyed and encouraged by the students, Turning Point USA students at Berkeley chapter, who showed up, over 1,000.
You know, to come kind of full circle here in our conversation, the thing that when I've been discussing the Charlie Kirk's murder and the whole situation, he personified this kind of person that would try to reach out with love, even to people that clearly didn't disagree. It didn't mean he would agree. It didn't mean he would validate, but he had this particular approach of not treating that other person as an enemy, but just someone that was perhaps mistaken.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, you know, again, this anecdote you have with Robert De Niro, how to approach things. When you have extremes, you know, there's this concept, the principle of mutual inhibition and mutual generation and mutual inhibition. You have one extreme breeds another extreme.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of this kind of thing in society.
Yes.
I wonder if the only way through it, because I believe, as you do, that most people are actually good, and there's a lot more good than evil or bad out there. It's just that you can kind of forget that, and you can kind of imagine that it's not like that, and you can forget that the person who's, you know, furious right now about something or got caught up in some sort of social contagion or whatever is actually probably in most cases. Sometimes they might be that really bad person, but in most cases they're not. They're just kind of mistaken. And
I agree. Yeah. There's a humanity there we need to appeal to. And it's just like when you're driving.
But you did, my point is, your example is you did it. Like, it worked.
It was instinctive at that moment. And I was like at a place in my life, and I think you have to come from, I mean, it has to be, what does this person need right now? And at that moment, that person needed some love and some reassurance and humanity. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're driving in your car, it's an interesting thing that happens. Sometimes, you want to merge, you know, and there's a big line of cars. They won't let you in. It's like, just because they just see the blinker and but if you put your hand out, people realize something. Oh, that's right. There's a human being inside there. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes in our worst moments, we must remember there's a human being inside there. And never forget that, because every human being is deserving of being treated with dignity by the very virtue of them being human. And that is something we must never forget. At the end of the day, if we can really take that Christian ethic of showing that light, it'll always overpower darkness.
Well, Rob Schneider, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for having me.